Hi, this is Simon from Tokyo Productions and welcome to another tutorial for Motion 5, and today we're going to be looking at creating this laser effect. So let's have a look at how it's all done. What I wanted to do first of all was explain the general principle of how to create the paths that the laser is going to follow. If you've done my weld tutorial, you'll know that I used a technique whereby we went into Adobe Illustrator and we exported the paths from there. But I wanted to show you how we could do it inside Motion, and it's really not too difficult. Probably a lot quicker in the long run. So what I've done here is I've made a guide letter, and to do that I've used my text tool, and I've used this font here, which is kind of fairly unusual. What I've done is I've come over to Appearance, selected Outline, grey colour, and I've set the width to 2. What I've also done for the purposes of this tutorial is to create a grid that shows you how this is going to work. You don't need to do this, but it'll just help to explain the process. Right, I'm going to turn off the grid just 1 second, and I want to come down here and I want to select my bezier tool. And then I want to come up here and I want to show HUD. And I'm going to use this nice yellow outline colour, and I'll have a width of 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my guide letter and I'm going to draw around it. So I'm going to start in this top right hand corner here. Start at this easy bit here where we've got these nice corners. So I'm going to click here, click here, click up here, and click down there. And because I'm simply clicking to add points, what I'm getting is linear corners, and those of course will be nice and sharp. But what am I going to do when I come to my curves here? So this is where I'm going to turn on the grid. And what we actually need to do is we need to find, in this instance, the horizontal and the vertical tangents. So these lines here where the curve of the circle meets this horizontal line and the vertical line in this case, and so on as we go around the shape. So let me just click here. And what I'm going to do is not just click simply, but I'm going to click and drag. And I'm going to drag horizontally because we've got this horizontal tangent. And then I'm going to come over here, which is where our vertical meets our curve. And I'm going to click and drag. And again, I'm going to drag vertically to get that curve to match up. And then I'm going to come over here, which is again where we've got this horizontal tangent. Clicking and dragging. Come down here where we've got a vertical one. Come down here, we've got another horizontal one. And I'm going to click over here, and that's going to go slightly wrong, but I'm not going to worry too much about that because we are going to revisit that. So that was just a click because we've now reached another corner. Come over here and click. And this is the easy bit. As we did before, we're just going to click in all of those corners. And then here we've got our horizontal tangent, so we're going to click and drag. Here we've got another vertical tangent, so we're going to click and drag. Over here we've got another horizontal one, so we're going to click and drag horizontally, like so. Vertical one here, clicking and dragging. Horizontal one here. Oops, probably gone too far there. And let's just click to close it on up. So if I turn off my grid, you can see we haven't really done too badly there. If I turn on my overlays, we can now just come in here and adjust these handles as necessary. So I'm going to drag that one out like that to make the curve match. Come to this one here, just shorten that one. Shorten this one a little bit as well. And come down here and I'll pull that one out so that curve matches a bit better. A little bit of an anomaly here. Maybe we just roll that over just a little bit like that. And despite the fact that's quite a complex shape, that was very easy to do because we were looking for these horizontal and vertical tangents and simply using those to position our points. So the key thing about this process is that we're using the absolute minimum number of points to define the shape. And that's how we can get these nice, smooth curves and do everything with the minimum effort. If you start adding too many extra points, it becomes much harder to control the shape than when you've got these nice, big, sweeping curves like that. Okay, so that's our guide example. Let's just now turn on our text that we want to use for the purposes of this tutorial. And again, I've done the same trick and I've created this outline using the text tool. And in this instance, I've used a font called CGF Locust Resistance. And if you go to dafont.com, you can download that for yourself if you want to use the exact same font as I'm using. So essentially, we're going to do the same thing as we did before. And in this instance, as you see, we've got lots of nice right angles, which are going to make life pretty easy. So let's again come down to our Bezier tool, select that. And as we know, we're just going to do the easy bit of marking out these points. And I'm going to come here to where that curve begins. And now, hang on, what do? I don't actually have an available vertical or horizontal tangent for this. But actually, what it is it's a 45-degree tangent. So if you imagine there's a 45-degree line touching this curve here, that's where I'm going to add my Bezier curve. So click and drag there, and then we're going to click here where the curve ends, and we'll click to close it on up. And again, we can just do a little bit of adjustment of that handle as necessary. So although the general rule was to use horizontal and vertical tangents, in cases like this, you will need to be using 45-degree tangents. So here you go, I've just added a 45-degree line so you can see what I mean. And if we turn on our overlays, you can see that that is indeed the point at which the 45-degree tangent is meeting that curve. So that's what we're doing in this instance. So I won't waste your time with all the other letters. They're obviously just the same principle. The A is very easy, it's all just corners. The S, again, we've got these 45-degree tangents at each corner. Those are easy. And there's only one thing I need to point out, which is that the E, although in our minds it's one single letter, for the purposes of this process, we need to treat it as two separate shapes. So we've got our main shape here, and then we've got the crossbar here. And we'll need to draw separate shapes for both of those. Now, I've shown you an example where I've used the text tool to create the template, but of course you could bring in some artwork if it's a logo with some that's not text-based. You could equally well bring in that and use it as a guide. So this technique is pretty adaptable. Okay, so I just need to talk about our project here. Let's come over to the project properties. As usual, it's 1920, 1080, 24 frames a second, and I've made it 10 seconds long. Right, the next thing we need to do is come up here to Object, create a new group, and then we want to come over to the library, Generators, and we want to look for the lens flare, and we're going to bring it into the new group here. Let's call this group Flares. And what we should also do is go through and label all these text objects. So I won't waste your time doing that, but you'll see very shortly that I'll have labelled all of these. You'll see that I've labelled the bar of the E as E bar and the other bit E main. Okay, so our lens flare is here. What we need to do is we need to come over to the inspector and let's just adjust the size down to 20 and the intensity up to 2. And let's just increase the fall off all the way up to 10 so it's not spreading out too much. So now I'm going to come to the library, I'm going to come to Behaviors, Basic Motion, and I'm going to grab Motion Path and I'll add it to that lens flare. And then I'll come to the inspector, Path Shape, I'm going to select Geometry. And here you'll see it now has a shape source well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take Bezier L and add it to the shape source. And if we play that, you'll see that that lens flare now travels around the shape that we've made. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. So we've got 6 of them. So right-click, duplicate, right-click, duplicate, right-click, duplicate, right-click, duplicate. What are we up to? We're up to 5, and one more, right-click, duplicate. So then we just need to name all these. So we've got one for each letter segment. So I'll come back when I've done that. So those are all labelled. Then we want to come to lens flare A, come to the behaviours, and we'll just drag the bezier A into the shape source well. Again, come to the lens flare S, come to behaviours, drag the S shape into the source well. Come to E main, behaviours, drag the E main shape into the source well. Come to the motion path for the Ebar and drag the Ebar into the source well. Come to the motion path for the R and drag the R shape into the source well. So now, if we play, those just follow around those paths as you would expect. I'd just like to point out one thing, which is that obviously the start point for all of these paths is the point that we chose as the start point when we were drawing the shapes. But supposing, for example, with the L here, if I zoom in, we wanted to start not at that top left-hand corner, but this corner here. So what I could come do is come to my Bezier L, let's show overlays, and let's come to edit points. And if I right-click on this point here, I can now set that as the start point. And you'll see that the lens flare now pops over there, and the animation will start from that point. So just think about doing that for any start points you're not happy with. Okay, now we need to look at the overall pace of the animation. Now you're probably not going to be using the word laser, you'll be using some text of your own choosing. But the really important thing is to carefully think about the timings for the write-on of each letter before you go too far with the project. And once you've got your timings, you need to make sure that you write them down. So let's just concentrate on the L for a second. I'm going to come to 20 frames on the timeline. I'm going to come to the motion path for the L, and I'm going to hit O on the keyboard. And if we press play, you'll see the lens flare moves around the path in just 20 frames. Okay, so what I'm also going to do is now come to the L shape, come to the library, come to behaviors shape, and I'm going to add a write-on behavior to the L. And again, let's come to frame 20, and with the write-on behavior selected, let's hit O. And if we now play, you'll see that those two things neatly follow each other. What we need to do is we need to add a write-on to all of those characters. So let's very quickly do that. Like this. Let's come to frame 20. Let's select the write-on for the A character and hit I on the keyboard. And that'll shorten it to start at that point. Let's select the motion path for the lens flare A and hit I on the keyboard. Then I'm going to step forward to frame 50. And I've got my motion path selected. I'm going to hit O. I'm going to come down to the Bezier write-on and I'm going to hit O. Let's look at what's happening there. So the L writes on and the A writes on. Now you'll notice I've chosen 20 frames for the L to write on and 30 frames for the A to write on, and that's because the A is a much longer path. So you really need to be thinking about the distance the effect has to travel for each of your letter paths and time yourself out accordingly. Okay, let's come back to frame 50 again. We're going to concentrate on the letter S. We'll select the write-on for the letter S and hit I. We'll select the motion path for the lens flare S and hit I. Then let's step forward to frame 90 because I want this to take place over 40 frames. We've got our motion path selected, so I'm going to hit O. And again, we'll come down to the write-on and we'll also hit O. Let's play that. Let's come back to frame 90. We're now on the outside of the E, so let's select the E main right on and hit I. Let's select the E main motion path and hit I. Let's come forward to frame 120 and hit O. So that's trimming the motion path for the E main. Let's select the E main right on and again hit O. Let's select the right on for the Ebar and hit I. Let's select the motion path for the Ebar and hit I. And now that's just a really short distance that has to travel. So I'm going to make this happen in 10 frames. So I'm going to move forward to 130 and hit O to trim the motion path. Come down to the Ebar right on and hit O. Let's select the right on for the bezier R and the motion path for the lens flare R. And let's step forward to frame 160, hit O to trim the motion path, come down to the right on and hit O. And now if we play that whole thing from the beginning, we can see how that's all working. So we also need to trim the lens flares so they start and end at the right places. So let's step forward to frame 20. I'm going to hit O with the lens flare left L selected, and then I'm going to select the lens flare for the letter A and hit I. Then let's step forward to frame 50 and hit O for the lens flare A, move up to the lens flare S, hit I, step forward to frame 90, hit O, select the lens flare E main, hit I, step forward to 120, hit O, select the E bar, hit I, step forward to 130, hit O, select the lens flare R, hit I, step forward to 180, because what I want to do is I want it to fade out this one. So I'm going to just hit O at 180. And let's come over to the library, behaviors, basic motion, and I'm going to add a fade in, fade out to that lens flare there. And let's set the fade in time to 0. So that will just fade as it hits its final position. So all in all, that looks like this. So now just a word about timings. If you've got a very long word and you don't really want it to last this long, have a think about maybe just starting your animation halfway through. It'll still look perfectly nice. What you don't really want to do is go any much faster than I'm already going, because otherwise the effect is just not really going to be visible or plausible. But if you want something short, you can just always start in the middle, or even just right on the last few characters, and it'll look pretty nice. Okay, so where are we? We've got our lens flares, we've got our right on and all that. It's all looking pretty nice, but we still need to create our laser. So let's close up that flares group and the guide text group. And let's come to the top here. Let's come to object new group. I'm going to come down here and select the circle tool. Come up here, window, show HUD. Turn off outline, turn on fill, and let's make that white. And I'm going to hold down the shift key and drag a small circle. Notice how in 5.2 small circles are now not really circular. There's a good reason for that. It's just a little bit annoying, but you are getting advantages, so I'm not going to complain too much. Okay, let's center that up and let's select that, come over to object, come down to replicate. Okay, so we've made a replicator out of that circle. Let's select line for our shape. Let's increase the number of points up to 100 just for now. My start point I'm going to set to 0 on X and minus 540 on Y. So it's down here at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to set the X end point to 0. And I also want to make this 3D, so I'll click on the 3D switch. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to select the end point, and then I'm going to right click, add parameter behavior, link. And here under the source I'm going to twirl open the flares, and I'm going to link it to lens flare L. And under source parameter, I'm going to select properties, transform, position, all. And now let's have a look what happens there. My replicator end moves along that path, along with everything else. All rather neat. Okay, so let's just make a little bit of an adjustment there. Let's come to the replicator itself. Let's come down to the scale, and let's reduce that down to maybe about 50. Really depends on how big you've made your original circle. And I'll increase the number of points. The trick here is to find the number that's going to give us a smooth enough line without actually overdoing it, because the more points you add, the more it's going to take to render. So that's really not too bad. 150, maybe 175. Let's go for that. Okay, so now that's all well and good. It follows around the L, but then it stops. So how are we going to make this all work? Well, what we need to do is we need to take that link behavior and we need to duplicate that. So we've got 6 instances of it. So right click, duplicate, right click, duplicate, right click, duplicate, right click, duplicate. What are we up to? 5. Right click, duplicate. And always a good idea just to name these. So I'll come back when we've named them. So that's link L. Okay, so they're labels as per our shapes. Then what we need to do is we need to just update all of those source objects with the appropriate lens flare paths. So let's drag the A into link A, scroll up, lens flare S into link S, E main into link E main, E bar into link E bar, and finally the R into that one there. So this is not quite right either, because it's only the R that's operative. So we just need to go through and we need to trim these. So first of all, we're going to come to frame 20, which was where the A begins. We're going to select the link A behavior and hit I. Then we're going to come forward to 50 frames where the S begins. Select the link S and hit I. Come forward to frame 90 where the E main begins, hit I on the link E main. Come forward to frame 120, select the link E bar, hit I. And come forward to frame 130 and select link R and hit I. And what I'm just going to do is, just for the purposes of showing you how this is playing, I'm going to reduce the number of points down to about 100. And then we can see that on the run. So now my laser is drawing on my letters. So I'm just going to come to frame 160. With the replicator selected, I'm going to hit O, just so that it pops off at that point once it's done its drawing. Okay, so now we've got the animation sorted out. We need to look at the styling of the whole thing. So I'm going to open up my text group. I'm going to select all my letters. So that's shift, clicking them, the first and the last. Come to the shape, and here on the outline brush color, I'm going to make that white. Close that up. I'm going to come over here, select filters, color correction. I'm going to select colorize and add that to that guide text group. Come over to the inspector, click on the black, make that black, click on the remap white and make that something like that. Then I'm going to take this guide text group and I'm going to right click, make clone layer. And I'm going to set the blend mode for this to linear dodge. Then I want to come over to the library. I want to come to filters, blur, Gaussian blur and add that. Come over to the inspector, let's have a amount of 15. Let's come over to the library again. What I want to do is, again under the blur category, I want to select channel blur and I'll add that above the Gaussian. Come back over to the inspector. Let's turn off blur red and blur green. And let's set the amount all the way up to 64 like that. Then I'm also going to come to the library, Filters, color correction, add a levels above that. Inspector, just going to crunch down the RGB, just a bit like that. And I'm also going to select the alpha and I'm going to punch that up as well. Something like that. So obviously we also need to style our laser itself. So let's select the replicator here. Let's come to the library. Let's come down in this instance and use a glow. So come to the glow category, add a glow to the replicator group. I'm going to set a radius of 5 and let's turn the threshold down to 0. Let's duplicate that glow. So right click duplicate. Let's increase the radius to 40 and the opacity let's reduce to 0.5. Let's duplicate it again, right click duplicate. This time let's set the radius all the way up to 100 and just want to select that replicator group and we need to adjust its blend mode and we'll set that to linear dodge like that, so it's all burning through nicely. Then we'll come over to the library, filters, color correction, we'll grab a levels, add that above the glows there. Let's select the blue channel and crunch down on that so we're getting a nice blue glow like that. And finally let's come back to the library, let's filters, blur, and let's add our channel blur above that. Again, let's turn off the red and the green. We can turn off the alpha in this instance and you can see if I turn that on and off how that's made our glow nice and blue and we still got that nice bright core. Okay, so that's a start. What we're going to do is I've brought in a background texture. You can bring in anything of your choosing. I've brought that into a new group right at the back there. At the moment this is not looking right at all because we need to add some lighting. So let's just tidy things up a bit. Let's close down that flares group and this group here that I've made just above the text, let's call that glow. Close that down as well. And this replicator group let's call laser and close that up as well. Close up our background and let's come to the top here, object, new light. So I want to set the intensity to 300 and then I want to link it to the path of the laser. So in order to do that I'm going to come over to properties, click on the position, right click, add parameter behavior link, and from this menu here to I can select flares, lens flare L. And now that's following along that path there. Can't really see it because we need to offset it on Z. So let's come down to the Z offset here and type a value of 15. And you can see that's now brought it sufficiently forward from our background that it's illuminating just enough. And following around like so. What we need to do is we need to duplicate it so it follows the A. So let's right click, duplicate, and here under our link, let's go to the to menu again, select flares, select lens flare A. We want to come to frame 20. We want to hit I with the light selected so it doesn't appear until that point. Again, we need to be careful to label these just so we know exactly what's happening. So right click and duplicate it again. We'll call it S. Step forward to frame 50. Hit I. We'll come to the behaviors. Under the to menu, we'll select flares, lens flare S. Again, we'll duplicate it. Right click duplicate. So E main. Step forward to frame 90. Hit I with the light selected. Come to the behaviors. Under the to menu, flares, E main. Step forward to frame 120. We'll duplicate this. Right click duplicate. Call it E bar. And again, behaviors, to, flares, E bar. Finally, we'll step forward to frame 130. Oh, sorry, I forgot to do something there. 120. We need to shorten that by hitting I on the keyboard there. Step forward to 130. Right click, duplicate. We'll call this light R. We'll hit I on the keyboard to shorten it, select the link under the to menu, flares, lens flare R. So there we go. That's all our lights positioned and animated. Let's turn off the 3D overlays and we can have a quick RAM preview. So now that's looking something like this. Okay, and the last thing I'd like to do is to add a camera. So I'm going to come up here to Object, New Camera, and I want to make sure these groups have become 3D. I don't know why that didn't work there. 3D group for the laser, 3D group for the flares, 3D group for my glow there, and 3D group for my guide text, and my background was already 3D. I think that's something to do with my preferences here. Come over. Yes, if you look here now, we've got a new option under preferences where it says new default group type, and I'd selected 2D for some reason. I think the default is automatic, so you probably won't see that. These groups will automatically be 3D once you add the camera, once you add the lights rather. So you won't need to manually set them to 3D just as I've done there. Okay, so now I'm going to just quickly select the laser group, come to properties and come down to lighting. And I don't want the laser to be influenced by the lighting, so I'm going to turn that off. I want it to be nice and bright. And I think I might do the same thing with the flares, turn that off. And again with the glow, turn that off. And with my text, turn that off. Just so it looks as though it's self-illuminated. Okay, then I'm going to select my camera. I'm going to come to the library. I'm going to come to behaviors, the camera section, and I'm going to select sweep and add that. And I'm also going to select dolly and add that. Let's select the sweep behavior, come to the inspector. I'll set the start to -45 and the end to 0. And the speed I'll set to decelerate so it gently relaxes into its final position. I'm going to duplicate that sweep, so right click, duplicate. And I'm going to select the axis as being X. And I'm going to set the start value as 0 and the end as -10. I'm going to come to my first frame, come to properties, and I will open the rotation. And I just want to set that X rotation to 10 to start off with. And so we'll be looking up at it like that. I think that's a nice look, like so. And I'm just going to select the dolly. Let's have -250 for the distance. I'm just going to select the camera, properties, open the position. Here I'm going to set the Z value to 120 for the end, just so we're not running off the edge of our background. So we'll be gradually moving out and panning as we go. And we just need to finally select our laser, come into the laser group there, select the replicator, select the replicator controls. And as we talked about, we need to increase those points so that line is continuous rather than dotted. So let's try for 200 and see if that works. I think that's going to be pretty good. Just one other small detail we need to take care of, and that's to come over here to the start point and adjust the Z position. So it's a little bit closer to camera. So let's enter a value of 500 for that. And what that means is that when we're looking at it from the side, it's going to have a little bit of 3D depth to it. If you think that laser is a little bit too wide, you can just adjust that scale. We could go for 40. That's maybe going to be a little bit better. I think I'll probably prefer that. So let's have a quick RAM preview. And it's looking something like this. Now, the key thing I would advise you with this project is to think about your characters and the timings and write them down on a piece of paper. Once you're happy with the write-on speed, write the numbers down on a piece of paper so you know exactly where you are and you can keep referring to it. Without that, you will be seriously lost. Also, you really do need to label each individual element, otherwise, again, you'll get lost. So As you've probably seen, it's a little bit labour intensive, but once you get into the routine of building it, you'll probably find it's quite fun. So. There we go. Thanks very much indeed for watching, and I hope to see you again on the next one.